Chapter 8, The Elf Child and the Minister. So we're going to get back to a little bit of suspense, back to the actual plot. And the beginning of this chapter continues where the previous one left off. Remember that Hester and Pearl are at Governor Billingham's home to deliver gloves, but also to talk with him about this rumor in town that people want to take Pearl away from Hester. So Governor Billingham is wearing a loose gown and easy cap. And I put a question mark here. It's like, what the heck? I mean, we definitely have descriptions from previous chapters about these men of the government being very properly dressed. A gown, this makes me think of almost like a choir gown or something like that. And it's sort of what they're talking about. So they did have sort of more casual at-home clothes that were a little bit more like a cape or a gown sort of thing. But he also has a very sort of fancy collar that he's wearing underneath it to sort of look important, which is what he likes to remind himself that he is. Also, I just want to mention Governor Billingham was a real person. He was the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and after a period of time, I don't know how many years, 5 or something years of being governor, don't quote me on the exact number, he was demoted to deputy governor. So that was referenced earlier that he doesn't have the same standing as he used to have. So this is a real historical figure who was also very much this way in terms of being very proper, but also privately pretty elaborate, which is what we've seen described. So he's very rigid and severe the way he looks, even though he's in this sort of casual clothing. And just the description here, again, is sort of sarcastic. This, to me, is more examples of tone from Hawthorne himself. It says, "But it is an error to suppose that our great forefathers, though accustomed to speak and think of human existence as a state merely of trial and warfare, and though unfeignedly prepared to sacrifice goods and life at the behest of duty, made it a matter of conscience to reject such means of comfort or even luxury as lay fairly within their grasp. This creed was never taught, for instance, by the venerable pastor John Wilson, whose beard, white as a snowdrift, was seen over Governor Billingham's shoulders, while its wearer suggested that pears and peaches might yet be naturalized in the New England climate, and that purple grapes might possibly be compelled to flourish against the sunny golden wall." So remember, we were already got a description of that garden as being very barren. So it just shows that like the people who settled there still have dreams of it being this magical, abundant place, and it's not in the beginning. The old clergyman, nurtured at the rich bosom of the English church, had a long established and legitimate taste for all goods and comfortable things. So this is in contrast. They're supposed to be rejecting those creature comforts, and yet in reality, because he comes from England and he comes from some social standing, he still wants those fine things in life, which we can see in the way he lives. So when they enter the house, this is who we have in the scene. So as predicted, I did think to myself that probably Roger Chillingworth is among them, because they described in the previous chapter that there was a leech and 2 ministers. And so the ministers are Mr. Wilson and Arthur Dimmesdale, who was our young reverend. So we get some background here on what's been going on with Roger Chillingworth since we last saw him. For 2 or 3 years past, he has settled in the town. It was understood that this learned man was the physician as well as the friend of the young minister, whose health had severely suffered of late by his too unreserved self-sacrifice to the labors and duties of pastoral relation. So I starred this. I have a question in my head about it. Like, what does it mean to be suffering for his duties? And what kind of self-sacrifice is he talking about? We're going to find out later, but I think I'd mark this. So Roger Chillingworth has become close friends of Arthur Dimmesdale, and Arthur Dimmesdale's health is suffering. So presumably he's trying to help make him well. The governor, in advance of his visitors, ascended 1 or 2 steps, and throwing open the leaves of the great hall window, found himself close to little Pearl, and the shadow of a curtain fell on Hester Prynne and partially concealed her. So they don't see Hester Prynne. This is important to know, but they literally bump right into Pearl. And the governor is so shocked. He's like, well, what have we here? I've never seen the like of my days of vanity. Here's this child very fancily dressed. So she really stands out because of what she's wearing. "Aye, indeed," cried good old Mr. Wilson. "What a little bird of scarlet plumage may this be! Methinks I have just seen such figures when the sun hath been shining through a richly painted window and tracing out the golden and crimson images across the floor. But that was in the old land." So she looks like she came from England when people dressed really nicely. "Prithee, young one, who art thou, and what has ailed thy mother to bedizen thee in this strange fashion?" So who are you, and why has your mother dressed you like this? Because it's inappropriate. "Art thou a Christian child? Where are you from? Did you come from England?" And Pearl answers, and she says, "I am mother's child, and my name is Pearl." And they sort of make fun of her name. They're like, Pearl? I mean, that's makes you think of white, but she is so red with all these clothes. "Ruby or coral or a red rose," said the old minister. "But where is this mother of thine?" So they don't see her, but then he does see her. "Oh, I see her." And then he turns, pardon me there, to Governor Billingham and whispers and says, "This is the selfsame child of whom we have held speech together, and behold here, the unhappy woman, Hester Prynne, her mother." So he's like, we were just talking about them, and here they are. "Sayest thou so? Nay, we might have judged that such a child's mother must needs be a scarlet woman and a worthy type of her of Babylon, but she comes at a good time, and we will look into this matter forthwith." So he's like, we're going to talk about this right now. And he just comes right at her and says it. Governor Billingham says, "Hester Prynne, there hath been much question concerning thee of late." I'm just going to jump through here a little bit. "Speak thou, the child's own mother. Were it not, thinkest thou, for thine little one's temporal and eternal welfare, that she be taken out of thy charge, and clad soberly, and disciplined strictly, and instructed in the truths of heaven and earth?" She should be wearing ordinary clothes, not looking so fancy. She should be more a picture of Puritan values. And Hester's like, "No, I can teach my little Pearl what I have learned from my own suffering," what she means by this. And they start to argue. The governor's like, "It's a badge of shame. It's because of the stain which that letter indicates that we would transfer the child to other hands. It's because you're such a sinner that other people would be better suited to take care of your child." And she says, "Nevertheless," and she tries to stay calm, though she's growing more pale, "this badge hath taught me. It daily teaches me. It is teaching me at this moment lessons whereof my child may be the wiser and better, albeit they can profit nothing to myself. So only my sins can only help improve my child. That's it." And so then the judge says, "Well, we will judge warily," says the governor, "and look well that we are about to do. Good Master Wilson, I pray you, examine this Pearl, since that is her name, and see whether she hath had such Christian nurture." So basically test her, see what she knows about the Bible. Let's see how well Hester Prynne has been educating her. So that should create some worry in you, the reader. The old minister seated himself in an armchair, but the child, unaccustomed to the touch or familiarity of any but her mother, escaped through the open window and stood on the upper step, looking like a wild tropical bird of rich plumage about to take flight. So she does not want to be spoken to or pulled close to these people. She runs away. So Mr. Wilson says, "Pearl, thou must take heed to instruction, that so in due season thou mayest wear in thy bosom the pearl of great price. Canst thou tell me, my child, who made thee?" Now, this is important. Pearl knew well enough who made her, for Hester Prynne, the daughter of a pious home, very soon after her talk with the child about her Heavenly Father, had begun to inform her of those truths, which the human spirit, at whatever stage of immaturity, imbibes with such eager interest. So she has been teaching her about religion. Pearl did know enough information that she could have been examined on the New England Primer or the first column of the Westminster Catechism. So she could have answered these questions, but because she's a child and a bit of a wild one, that perversity, which all children have more or less of, and which Pearl had tenfold the portion, now at this most inopportune moment decided to play around with these people and not answer the question. She finally answers that she had not been made at all, but had been plucked by her mother off the bush of wild roses that grew by the prison door. So this is not going to help Hester's cause. Old Roger Chillingworth, with a smile on his face, whispered something to the young clergyman. So this would be to Arthur Dimmesdale. Hester Prynne looked at the man of skill, and even then, with her fate hanging in the balance, was startled to perceive what a change had come over his features, how much uglier they were, how his dark complexion seemed to have grown duskier, and his figure more misshapen since the days when she had familiarly known him. She met his eyes for an instant, but was immediately constrained to give all her attention to the scene going forward. So this to me is ominous. He has changed. He's gotten stranger looking. Maybe he's becoming more of a symbol. I would definitely consider that possibility. "This is awful," cried the governor about Pearl's answer. "Here is a child of 3, and she cannot tell who made her. Without question," he says, "she is equally in the dark as to her soul, its present depravity, and future destiny. We don't need to inquire any further. He's made up his mind. She needs to go live with somebody else." Hester catches hold of Pearl and draws her to her arms, and she freaks out, as she should as a mother. "God gave me this child," she said. "He gave her in requital of all things else which ye hath taken from me. She is my happiness. She is my torture nonetheless. Pearl keeps me here in life. Pearl punishes me too. See ye not, she is the scarlet letter, only capable of being loved, and so endowed with a millionfold the power of retribution for my sin. Ye shall not take her. I will die first." As any mother would say. "My poor woman," said, this would be Mr. Wilson, "the child shall be well cared for, far better than thou canst do it." And Hester argues back, "God gave her into my keeping. I will not give her up." And then she turns to Mr. Dimmesdale, and she begs him, "Speak thou for me. Thou wast my pastor, and hadst charge of my soul, and knowest me better than these men can." So this indicates she's no longer going to church because she feels like she's been alienated. But she used to go to church, and Reverend Dimmesdale was her pastor. "I will not lose the child. Speak for me. Thou knowest, thou hast sympathies which these men lack. Thou knowest what is in my heart, and what are a mother's rights, and how much the stronger they are when that mother has but her child and the scarlet letter. Look thou to it. I will not lose the child. Look to it." She is so desperate for help. So, Reverend Dimmesdale helps her. He holds his hand over his heart. This could be a quiz question, which was his custom whenever his peculiarly nervous temperament was thrown into agitation. So people might say, like, what is it that he does when he's nervous? He puts his hand over his heart. That could be a question. His large dark eyes had a world of pain in their troubled and melancholy depth. And he says, "There is truth in what she says." And he has a sweet voice. And it's powerful, even though he is nervous. Truth in what Hester says, and in the feeling which inspires her. God gave her the child, and gave her too an instinctive knowledge of its nature and requirements. There we have it again. Both seemingly so peculiar, which no other mortal being can possess. And moreover, is there not a quality of awful sacredness in the relation between this mother and this child. So how is that? Asks the governor. Like, explain yourself. And he says, it must be even so, for if we deem it otherwise, do we not thereby say that the Heavenly Father, the creator of all flesh, has lightly recognized a deed of sin and made of no account the distinction between unhallowed lust and holy love? This child of its father's guilt and its mother's shame has come from the hand of God to work in many ways upon her heart, who pleads so earnestly and with such bitterness of spirit the right to keep her. It was meant for a blessing of her life. So he's saying that we can't trump God. We can't take away something God has given her. That's inappropriate as a man of the cloth. Like, he would never want that to happen. He sees that there's a reason that Pearl is there. Mr. Wilson is convinced. So he's the older minister who kind of like, I'm sure, supervises Dimmesdale. He says, well said. I feared the woman had no better thought than to make a mountebank of her child. So this is an important word. This is not a word you've probably ever seen. It has a lot of different meanings. In general, it means to make a show or a spectacle of something. And here's the thing. She has been doing that. The fact that she's dressing Pearl on purpose in very elaborate clothing is sort of flaunting her sin, which is what Wilson was concerned about, especially looking at her now in the room, dressed the way she is. It's like, she's dressing her like the Scarlet Letter. Does that seem like maybe Hester is flaunting her sin, kind of like throwing it in people's faces and, saying like, here, this is who I am? There is some concern for that. And I think Hester has gotten the message that she ought to pull back a little on that. Oh, not so, not so, says Mr. Dimmesdale. She recognizes, believe me, the solemn miracle which God hath wrought in the existence of that child. And she may feel, too, what methinks is the very truth, that this boon was meant to keep the mother's soul alive and to preserve her from the blacker depths of sin into which Satan might else have sought to plunge her. So now he's tapping into their beliefs about Satan and witches, like this child's keeping her from the devil. That's important, especially in this community. So eventually, they decide that she can keep her. He goes on to say the Creator's sacred pledge, if she brings the child to heaven, the child also will bring its parents hither. Herein and is the sinful mother happier than the sinful father? For Hester Prynne's sake then, and no less for the poor child's sake, let us leave them as Providence has seen to place them. So he's saying, like, the father is tortured even more because he doesn't have the child. At least Hester has the child and can be made better. Like, if the child goes to heaven, then perhaps Hester will too. That's what he's saying. So then we have a line here, which is important. You speak, my friend, with a strange earnestness. This tells me there's some suspicion. And guess who says this? Roger Chillingworth, of course. And there is a weighty import in what my young brother has spoken, says Mr. Wilson. So Mr. Wilson's like, well, he's speaking with passion because this is an important topic. So what do you think, Master Billingham? Basically, he's going to have the final word. And so he admitted, he's like, okay, that's fine. She can keep her so long at least that there will be no further scandal in the woman. Care must be had, nevertheless, to put the child to due and stated examination in the catechism at the hands of Master Dimmesdale. So he's going to agree to let Pearl stay with Hester as long as Pearl starts to get formal religious education, and that Master Dimmesdale should be the person to do that. Which is certainly better than some of the other people I could imagine in town. Moreover, at a proper season, the tithing men must take heed that she go both to school and to meeting. So she needs to go to school and she needs to go to church at some point. So those are his conditions. The young minister, on ceasing to speak, had withdrawn a few steps from the group and stood with his face partially concealed in the heavy folds of the window curtain, while the shadow of his figure Remember, this is kind of where Hester was concealed before. The shadow of his figure, which the sunlight cast upon the floor, was tremulous with the vehemence of his appeal. So he's kind of like standing in the corner and shaking, this poor man. Pearl, that wild and flighty little elf, stole softly towards him. So she's behaving differently, and taking his hand in the grasp of both her own, laid her cheek against it. A caress so tender and withal so unobtrusive that the mother who was looking on asked herself, is that my Pearl? Like, why is she being so tender? I could see this also being a quiz question. What does Pearl do? She goes to Reverend Dimmesdale and takes his hand and rests her cheek on it. And then the minister lays his hand on the child's head and then bends down and kisses her forehead. So there's a very tender moment here. The little baggage hath with witchcraft in her, I profess. So Mr. Dimmesdale, said, doesn't believe this, obviously, but the other two think like, she could definitely have some witchcraft. Like, she's going to need to be taught. That's going to be Mr. Dimmesdale's job, basically, is to, be kept from the devil. And then Roger Chillingworth says, a strange child. It is easy to see the mother's part in her, which is a dig to Hester, because obviously he knows her. It was her, they were husband and wife, or are husband and wife still. Would it be beyond a philosopher's research, thinks he gentleman, to analyze that child's nature and guess who the father is? So it's like, okay, she has this like really mean part of her, which Roger Chillingworth is equating to part of like Hester's nature, this wild and rebellious attitude, but also she's having this moment of tenderness. Chillingworth is like, maybe that would help us figure out the father. And Mr. Wilson says it would be sinful to follow the clue of profane philosophy. Better to fast and pray upon it, and still better to leave the mystery as we find it, unless Providence reveal it of its own accord. So he's saying like it's sinful to go looking for the Father. We should leave it as it is. Thereby every good Christian man hath a title to show a father's kindness towards the poor deserted babe. Well, this is an interesting idea. His idea is that if we don't know who the Father is, perhaps every man in town will treat Pearl in a fatherly way. I made a note, that's not likely. It seems like everybody's really hell-bent, pardon the phrase, but that's kind of what it is, on torturing the two of them and judging them. So remember, it does seem to me like the Puritans are greater sinners in how they treat Hester and Pearl than Hester is herself. So this is interesting. Here's a new character. As Hester is leaving, I can imagine so relieved. Out of the upstairs window is the face of Mistress Hibbins, Governor Billingham's bitter-tempered sister, who a few years later was executed as a witch. So right there, living in Governor Billingham's own home, is his sister, who was later executed as a witch, probably under his orders, but also just Puritan law. And she yells out, she says, "Hist, hist." And she says, "Will you come to the forest tonight and dance with us? But the black man will be there." So she truly is leading like seances and sort of evil gatherings in the forest. So she is acting like a witch. And Hester says, "Make my excuse to him, so please you. I must tarry at home and keep watch over my little Pearl. Had they taken her from me, I would willingly have gone with thee into the forest, and signed my name in the black man's book too, and that with mine own blood." So she's kind of confirming their suspicions, or what Dimmesdale argued, which is if they took the child away, Hester would fall to the devil. She's saying, if they had taken her, I would be coming out there with you. So she's even admitting it. And then the witch says, "We shall have thee there anon." She's like, you're going to be coming eventually. So that's kind of creepy. But even thus, early had the child saved Hester from the Satan's snare.